Well, hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. I'm laughing because I don't know where to start with this car. I was so deep into Rolls-Royce and Bentley in the 1990s and early noughties that it's difficult for me to try and convey as much information as I can in as short a period as possible. Anyway, the car we're featuring here is a Bentley Continental T. Very rare car. They made in total just over 300 of them, left-hand drive and right-hand drive. But there were variants within that, countless variants, the Le Mans Specials, the Mulliners, etc. This, and consequently, Bentley could ratchet the price up magnificently on these cars. To give you some idea of the sort of hierarchy of cost, this was just over 20% more expensive than the Continental R, which is an almost identical car, as I shall explain in a little while. And it was even 7% more expensive than the Azure convertible, which was sort of supposedly the top of the range. The Continental T was born in 1998, and it was based on the Continental R. Are you keeping up? I've only just started. The Continental R was styled by a British styling house, Heffernan and Greenley. They came up with this rather whizzy two-door Bentley style to sort of reassert the Bentley label with a new sporting coupe, and that was around 1990, 1991. Bentley productionized the car and it became known as the Continental R. It's based on this whole series, Continental R, Continental S, Continental T, Azure, are variations on the same theme, but the basic underpinnings of the car date right back to 1965, the very first monocoque or unitary constructed body that Rolls-Royce and Bentley built. So we've got 1960s technology in play to a certain extent. The front suspension has been reworked. The rear suspension was always semi-trailing arms and still is, but that was re-engineered with the introduction of the Silver Spirit in 1980. They brought out a new rear subframe with more sympathetic semi-trailing arms for spirited driving. It kept the contact patch, the geometry changed, and it kept the contact patch of the wheel and tyre more in contact with the road, as opposed to being at an angle if the car was moving or rolling or whatever. And that change actually served Bentley well, because in 1982 they brought out the Mulsanne Turbo, which was a great success, but it had the standard handling of the Bentley Mulsanne non-turbo. And then in 1985, Bentley brought out a car with improved road holding, mainly consisting of harder springs and larger diameter anti-roll bars. Not terribly scientific, but it worked to a certain extent, and that became called a car known as the Turbo R for road holding. And it was the first, that and the Camargue around the same time, the Rolls-Royce Camargue, were the first cars that Rolls-Royce and Bentley actually were comfortable putting alloy wheels on. Up until then, they had soldiered on with the pressed steel items. Even the Mulsanne Turbo had the pressed stainless steel wheel trims. And this was because the engineering department at Bentley was very stubborn, is the word I would describe. They dug their heels in and said, I don't care how much it would affect the look or the performance of the car, we are not comfortable with alloy wheels, which was frankly one of several Crewe, Rolls-Royce and Bentley at the time's ridiculous diktats, really, to the styling department and whoever else. But anyway, so the Continental R came along. Under the skin, it's a Turbo R. But at the time, Bentley very proudly proclaimed that the front end, the whole front assembly from the scuttle forward, was between 30 and 40% stiffer than the Silver Spirit or the Bentley Turbo R body, the SZ body, as it was called. Wow, 30 to 40% stiffer of a 1965 technology chassis. So yes, there was great progress made, but there was still huge room for improvement. One of the ways that you can tell the fact that this car dates back to the mid-60s and that it had this crossover between car with a chassis underneath and unibody construction is the floor. When you open the door on this, or any of the SZ, the four-door saloon cars of the 80s and early to mid-90s, the floor is almost flat with the bottom of the door. So you step up into the floor, but it doesn't dish like floor pans do on cars underneath the bottom of the doors. It's sort of level right across, which is very nice. A lot of American cars did that too, because they had the chassis frame underneath, so they couldn't put deep floors in. And it's quite pleasing to have a floor that is level with the doors. Very surprisingly unusual, actually, on British cars of this era, certainly. And a sort of a cry back to the coach-built days when you had the chassis underneath and the floor on top. It gives an air of opulence, actually. So Bentley brought out the Continental R in 1991-92 with the 30% stiffer front end. The engine wasn't amazingly powerful at the time. It was around about 320 brake horsepower, which for a turbocharged 6.75 litre V8 is not spectacular, but it was a huge percentage over the non-turbo car. And in 1991-92, they brought in catalysts in, I think, late 1991, and that actually sapped the engine of quite a lot of power. So before that, they were developing more than 320 brake horsepower. And they took a temporary dip in 91-92, around the time the Continental R was launched, because of increasing emissions constraints coming in again. So around this time, somebody who I knew at the time a little bit, a chap called Ken Lee, was director of powertrain engineering, and he, it's funny, whoever was the chief engineer at the time, I knew them almost all sequentially, said the big V8, as this engine was called, there was always loads of tuning potential in it. And they were right. Ken Lee altered the porting of the big V8. Cross-bolted main bearings came in 1989 to handle the extra power and torque. And the big V8 soldiered on and soldiered on. This is almost its final form, actually. This is the charge-cooled 6.75 litre engine. It's just a very good product, and it ended up being 420 brake horsepower, nearly 600 pound-foot of torque. It was certainly up there with the most powerful cars in the world, production cars. In this form here, the Continental T was the hot version. It was 420 brake horsepower. I mean, the cars are massively over-engineered. They're one of the most over-engineered, if not the most over-engineered car in the world of that era. Mercedes-Benz were hot on their heels, but they weren't, the Maybach hadn't yet appeared. They weren't in this territory price-wise, and Mercedes-Benz had the technology, but they didn't have the price tag. This car, when it was new, was £248,000. It was the most expensive production car in the world. And as I've explained, even more expensive than an Azure or the Continental R. The main difference, I will finally get to it, between the Continental R and this is this bit here. The Continental R, the engineers at Bentley decided that they could make a more sporty version of the Continental R. So they removed 4 inches from the entire car's body here. The rear legroom suffered, but what they ended up with was a more high-performance version of the Continental R. So the Continental T was a bit of a hot rod, to be honest. As I say, they had so many variations. The funny thing is, we've got 3 of these Bentleys here at the moment. 2 Continental R wide bodies. So in other words, it's the Continental R, the longer wheelbase one with the 4 inches, the standard original Continental R body shell, but with the Continental T, wider wheel arches, bigger wheels and brakes, and a bit more power. So this is a tricked up version of the Continental R with 4 inches shorter wheelbase to give more precise handling. Which works. It's a really fantastic driver's car, this. You have torque from 2 turbocharged torque from virtually the word go. It's just the most blissful thing, as we'll discover in a minute, to drive. They do have an Achilles heel, and it's the cylinder head gaskets. This engine is, there's a lot going on under here. Marcus has just done the cylinder head gaskets on this car. It's a bit like, he described this as like a layer cake. You take one level of gubbins off the top of the engine, then you find another wiring loom and you take that, then you get to the ram pipes, which have to be taken off in a particular sequence on the induction system, 8 individual ram pipes under there. Then you get down to another layer, then you take the valve gear off, and then you take the cylinder heads off. It's a big job on this car, several £1,000s. It's not for the faint-hearted, not for the amateur mechanic. So we've got three of these cars here at the moment. This one, a Continental T. We've also got 2 Continental Rs, and to confuse matters even more, you could then order your Continental R tricked up as well, with the extra wheelbase, but the wider arches and the bigger wheels and brakes. So there was sub-edition after sub-edition after sub-edition. It was, you could have virtually anything you wanted. If you wanted an engine with pink induction pipes, you could probably have had it. At this time, Crewe were fighting for survival. We know very shortly afterwards, in fact, during this car's production, VW bought out Bentley in 1998. Just when this car was launched, it lasted until 2003. This particular car was bought new by Lord Bamford, the JCB car enthusiast and magnate. He ordered 3 of them. Apparently he still got 2, and this one went to a private owner who we have done the work for. And the head gaskets go around about 60 to 70,000 miles, almost as a matter of when, not if. And it's largely because people don't warm them through thoroughly before they start accessing the performance. Okay, it shouldn't happen. There are plenty of modern cars out there, or there were even at that time, that didn't blow head gaskets if you drove them hard. But there isn't an internal combustion car on Earth that has an engine that is bulletproof when it's cold. Just doesn't happen. It's almost like a routine maintenance thing, the cylinder head gaskets on them, but I love them. They're great cars. They're magnificently over-engineered, apart from that one area. The rear brake discs are a big job to change. You have to strip them. Rolls-Royce made them incredibly complicated. Again, dating back to 1965. Same design of disc and wheel bearing. Inspect the rear brake discs for rust. But yeah, the Continental R and the Continental T in particular were real headbangers, actually. This is as close as you get to a hot rod from Rolls-Royce and Bentley. The ignition switch is down here. On the Continental T, the standard was the machine-turned dashboard, aluminium dashboard, with an ignition switch that you simply click to the first position and then press a red starter button on the center console to start the engine. Red being the Continental T starter button. Azure and Continental R had black starter buttons. If you wanted a red starter button, they would charge you a king's ransom for that too. It was all about the dollar. Now, let's take a look at some of the features or some of the pitfalls and things that happen to the engine. Well, Marcus has stripped the engine, and like all modern car engines, they're very, very complicated around exhaust emissions, fuel economy, the amount of impedimenta that they actually have on them, valves, solenoid controlled actuators, all sorts of things like that is quite mind-boggling actually. And Marcus best described it as a layer cake, where you take one load of stuff off, the HT leads, the inlet plenums, and then you've got another layer underneath that, and then another layer. But here it is in all its glory. This is the 6 3/4 litre engine, alloy block, cast iron liners. It's been like that since 1962. When it was first put in the Silver Cloud 2, and it's been an incredibly successful engine. It originally developed 220 brake horsepower, around that figure, in 1962 as a 6.2 litre engine. And then in 1970, due to emissions, robbing engines of power, emissions measures coming into play, Rolls-Royce and Bentley as it was then, at Crewe, chose to up the capacity to 750cc, 6.75 litres. And it stayed at that. The big V8, as it's called at Crewe, has stayed like that for a very long time, right up to the present, really. As I say, it started off with 220 brake horsepower, and in this guise, it was up to 420, so almost double. It's got the Garrett T4 turbocharger on it, this great big beast of a thing here, which is a truck turbocharger. Actually, it's very old technology. This is used on trucks in the 1980s, diesel trucks, and was adapted by Broad Speed Engineering, Ralph Broad, a very, very clever guy who was at the cutting edge of turbocharger technology in the 1970s. Rolls-Royce experimented with turbocharging in the mid-70s. And it came out as the Bentley Mulsanne Turbo in 1982. And it, just simply altering a few settings, they were able to actually turbocharge it and get it up to 300 odd brake horsepower, 330, 340. So it was, I think, 30 to 40% power increase, whatever that works out at, just by bolting a turbo onto it at the time. And this is one of the final evolutions of the hand-built cars at Crewe. The engine was originally subcontracted to Cosworth to be put together, and the cylinder head gasket failure on these engines is quite common. Normally it happens, in my experience, around about 60 to 70,000 miles, depending on how the car's been driven. It varies, but there's obviously a lot going on under here. For a production car of the 1990s. Great big thumping 6.75 litre engine, turbo, emissions equipment, a Zytec Formula One derived engine management system. You've got the two brake pumps here. The braking system is a redundant system, so the mineral oil is pumped by these pumps up to accumulators and then into and then around the car to what's called a distribution valve on the end of the driver's brake pedal, and that does what it says. It simply unleashes some of the pressure that is stored up in the braking system ready to use. Very effective system, taken from Citroën, and it works beautifully. And now, while we've got all this induction system off, is the time to have a look at these brake pumps and see if they're leaking, or there's a couple of O-rings on the sleeves on the outside that actually can perish and just start to leak. So we'll have a look at those. But it looks in very good shape, this car, very good indeed. I'm just going to have a look at what causes the head gaskets to fail now. So we'll have a look at a cylinder head gasket off it. Well, this is the head gasket, or one of them. It's what's called a composite head gasket. So it's actually a compressed material, sort of paper, plasticky alloy, if you like, mixture. And the firing rings on the cylinder head gasket, these parts, the interaction between these and this part, the mating surface of the gasket, is critical. If the gasket manufacturer makes this too big, this does not get enough airtime in terms of really being compressed between each surface, because this has a crush, as it's called, predetermined crush dimension, and if that crush is not right, the cylinder head will sit on these and crush these far more than it will the rest of it, and that's when you get coolant leaks and things. They've tried to mitigate it by putting these beads around them of sealant, but if the crush ratio isn't quite right, either way, either it rests on the sealing rings or the sealing rings don't crush enough and the head is resting on this. Both of them can be problematic. But yeah, the crush is it's surprisingly it is very, very critical. But on this engine, they are a bit of a natural born failure. As I say, they do go at 60 to 70,000 miles if the performance of the car, because this is a heavy car. it's not just the torque that the engine generates, it's the resistance that's in the car as well. This is a 2.5 ton car nearly. It's a lot of weight going through the driveline to actually move off the line and accelerate as it does. But here is the main culprit. This firing ring has started to fail here. We've got combustion gases starting to come into the edge of the firing ring. This silicon bead has gone here, and that's going straight into the cooling system. This is one of the ports on the cooling system. And what happens then is that the compression starts to ooze out, and it actually pressurizes the cooling system, and it forces the coolant out of the overflow. So this is pretty regular. That one's on the way out as well. The other head gasket is better, but it's not wonderful. You can see again on this side exactly the same thing. In fact, there, the carbon staining from the combustion process has gone right up to the coolant port there on the cylinder head. So we've had our money's worth out of this cylinder head gasket, but it's definitely been poorly, this engine, so we need to sort that out. Well, another aspect that we're looking at here is the seats. This is a common problem on these cars, actually. And the seats are out of before people start screaming, well, typical Rolls-Royce and Bentley, problems with the seats. These are actually out of a BMW 8 series. The Azure had them fitted when Pininfarina developed the Bentley Azure for Rolls-Royce and Bentley, and it was then at around 1995. They used the seats from the BMW 8 series, and that spread, and this Continental T has got the same seats. They sort of standardized them. The problem is, part of the mechanism is cables that spin inside their housings, their covers, and the cables actually stretch and warp, and the seat does a little dance. So you press the accelerator to raise the height of the seat, and one side goes up and the other one doesn't, which doesn't look too nice outside Claridge's when one is going for dinner. So we have to overcome this, and there is no fix for this. Actually, there is no sort of there are one or two people who have tricks up their sleeves to get round it. There's a workaround, but not a proper fix. So we're in the process of doing the workaround as best we can to the seats to get them. The cable runs under here in a span round to the gearbox here, and it just gets snarled up over a period of years, particularly if heavy people have been sitting on it. We won't go into that too much, but yeah. So another Achilles heel of this model is the seat, and the seats pre that also had their own problems with the electronic control units and the mechanisms on those as well. So seats are a thing. So if you're actually in the market for one of these cars, run the seats through their cycles with the switches on the center console to make sure they're actually working properly. Otherwise, you're in for a bill. Yeah, anyway, enough of all that. Let's take the car for a run and see what makes the Continental T really, really special. Is it as brutish to drive as it is brutish to look at? Let's find out. Well, we have a flashing alert, and that's because the passenger seat is out of the car. These are like, I would describe Bentleys of this era as like racehorses. They're fantastic when they're in the zone, when they're doing what they should be doing, what they were built to do, which is actually be used apart from anything else. They don't like being stood around, and that is true of a lot of classic cars, particularly Bentleys. Racehorses, fantastic, but the level of maintenance and attention that they need, because this is a lot of this, the handbrake mechanism, etc., is straight from 1965. Labour was cheap in 1965. It's not like it is now, where you take a car in, plug it into the laptop, change the oil and filter and the brake fluid, and you're okay for another 3 years. It's not like that. These are very labour-intensive cars. That's the downside, but the upside is they are so special to drive. There is such a sense of occasion. One feels almost imperious, if I use that word, because you're sat so high. It really is quite the feeling being sat in here with this swathes of leather. Everything is either leather or wood or steel. No moulded plastic sprayed with chrome spray, thank you very much. Even these eyeball vents are stainless steel castings. It's just lovely. And this is the culmination of all those decades of development and production. This is the ultimate. SZ was the Silver Spirit Bentley Mulsanne body shell. It's the ultimate SZ-esque period development, this car. It is the sum of all those efforts. That needle is bang in the middle, which means the thermostat is behaving itself. As I've mentioned before, these do have a fail-safe. They have 3 lead or plastic pellets in the thermostat, so if the engine overheats, they automatically melt and allow more coolant through. One of the things that the engineers at Crewe have, and I've discussed many times with Ulrich Eichhorn, Dr. Pefkin, right through to my friend Matthias Rabe, who is the Director of Engineering at Bentley at the moment. One of the things we've discussed is the waftability of this big V8, the generations, the input that people have had. Ken Lee in the 1980s ported the cylinder heads and got some more power from the turbocharged engine that way. Then in 1989, the cross-bolted main bearings came in the block to strengthen it all up. And then Ulrich Eichhorn again in the early noughties rejuvenated the big V8 for the Mulsanne. We've got T's and P's now. I'm going to open the taps and see what that, just the slightest whisker of throttle movement, you're off, but let's see what the proper hardcore acceleration is like on this car. There we go. Whee! Absolute beast. The back goes down, the back squats, the front raises. This is a 2.3 ton car, and the amount of torque required to actually make the whole balance of the car move in a straight line is immense. And it's just got so much torque. I mean, we take these figures for granted now with electric cars, but you can't beat a big turbocharged V8. Give me this over an electric motor or two any day of the week. Here we go again. Whoa! So much grunt. And those great big disc brakes, twin calipers on the front, arresting the weight. They are very firm on the suspension, these, very firm. I make a mental note about this every time I drive a Continental T, because they wanted to get the body control to a maximum. They had to damp them hugely, and sometimes you can actually hear the leather creaking, the headlining up against here, or the sun visors. You can actually hear it creaking because the body is just the momentum and the movement of the body. It's a 1965 floor pan that this car is based on, but there is, it just doesn't roll. The turn-in is fantastic. I'll go around there's Corey again. The brakes are the redundant system, so there's constantly pressure of round about 2,500 pounds per square inch waiting to be released by the brake pedal. You're not actually pumping any fluid at all when you press the brake pedal. You're just opening under here what are called distribution valves in Rolls-Royce and Bentley speak from this time, where you're unleashing 2,500 pounds per square inch of pressure to each of the 4 corners. It is a very, very good system. Very powerful, a real feeling of reassurance. I'm not going to do it because it's somebody else's property, and the roads aren't big enough, but you really can throw these round. I'm just going to go through this bend a little bit quick, and we'll see what that turn-in is like. Yeah, there we go. Absolutely no body roll. That's fairly spirited. That's probably about 70% of the car's grip I was using there, and completely composed, if very jiggly, the ride. Open the taps again. Marcus has done a wonderful job of the head gaskets on this car and all the associated layers, as he described it, a layer cake. You take one level off, then you reach another, etc. But it's a tricky job, it's a time-consuming job, labour-intensive, as is everything on these cars. They were not built to be easy to work on. They are very special. You need to understand these cars to actually get the best from them. And that's the thing about this. The power delivery is addictive. It really is. It's quite easy to feel sort of hedonistic in this car. So I'm going to give this car a quarter throttle or something like that. Just get on a level, smooth bit of road, which is an achievement in itself. Okay, here we go. That's a quarter throttle. And it's wafting along. I'll do that again, quarter throttle. The turbo isn't even working. Then I give it more and it's off. Let us not forget, this car was £250,000 new 22 years ago. This is the last of the sort of hand-built Crewe Bentleys. Within reason. I mean, you've got the Mulsannes, but even they weren't hand-built to the same level this was. And again, we just have to open the taps just because we can. There we go. Whee! Oh, so much speed. Yeah, a wonderful, wonderful feeling. 420 brake horsepower and 600 foot-pounds of waftability with a squeeze of a tiny pedal. There we go. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please remember to subscribe, and we'll be back with something else very soon.